Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Autism Understanding Scotland's webinar on Autistic Joy. And we are so excited to bring it to you this evening. My name is Marion McLaughlin, and I'm the CEO at Autism Understanding Scotland. I always want to know who are the people that are bringing in me any webinars. So we'll give you a wee introduction to myself and my colleague. I'm late diagnosed autistic. And so I was diagnosed autistic about 4 years ago, and I'm a former primary school teacher and the mother of an autistic child. I'm also one of the spokesperson for the Scottish Government Different Minds campaign. And joining me tonight and sharing the webinar is Felicity. Hi, Flick.
Hiya, so I'm Felicity Goodhall, also known as Flick. I will answer to either. I'm the senior autism practitioner here at Autism Understanding Scotland. I'm also late diagnosed autistic myself. I didn't get my formal diagnosis until last year, so I'm still quite newly diagnosed really, which is very exciting. I am a former English tutor, mother of autistic children as well, and I'm also currently one of the co-chairs on the Aberdeenshire Autism Strategy Planning Group, which is all kicking off this week, so it's very exciting.
You must be knackered. You're very tired. You must be tired. So what to, sorry, my it's going all over the place today. What to expect today? So we're going to start off with a little bit of a discussion about what autism is and kind of what it means to be autistic. Then we're going to have a little bit of a look at autistic joy, and then we're going to talk about how to be an ally whenever we're looking at autistic joy as well, because that's something that's really important. So, you know, we are still going to be a little bit political. We're still going to be having a little think about that, yes, but largely I think autistic joy is a political act by itself, though, isn't it? It's
yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
So let's have a look. Yeah, what's autism really? So will I take this one? You can take the next flick. Yeah, there we go. So for anybody who hasn't come along to any of our What is Autism webinars before, we haven't done one for a while. This is some of the information that you can get off our website as well. Autism is having a brain that is built in a fundamentally different way to most other people's. What happens at the end of the second trimester, the beginning of the third trimester, is that all brains, autistic or not, develop these really well-developed synaptic pathways. And these pathways are really important because when information is being passed from one neuron to the next in your brain to help you to process the world around you, the synaptic gap is what they jump across so that they can get from one neuron to the other. Now, in most typically developing brains, there undergoes this big natural pruning process where some of the synaptic pathways are just kind of cut back. But autistic people like myself, like Felicity, like many of you, just don't do that pruning process. We keep our unpruned brains instead. So that means that there's more pathways there for the information to get passed backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. There's a few, key structural differences. There's sometimes a difference in the number of neurons in our brain as well. So some parts of the brain might have more neurons than you might typically expect. Some might have fewer than you might typically expect. And there's sometimes a difference in the size of the different areas of the brains as well. So in some autistic people, they might have quite an enlarged amygdala. Some might have a really small amygdala. And some of that might be to do with our lived experiences as well as the fact that we're autistic too. Autistic brains tend to be more symmetrical as well, which is something Flick and I just love because, who doesn't love a bit of symmetry, right? Absolutely. We don't know why that is. That just that apparently they tend to be. And also there's evidence that autistic people are more likely to use both sides of our brain at the same time. So if you give us a logic puzzle or a logic question, then we might have an emotional response to it too, because we're still thinking about it in terms of that. And if you give us an emotional problem, then we might still have a logical response to that as well, which is sometimes quite unexpected for some people. But it's because we're using both sides of those brains, they tend to be quite well connected. And there also tends to be really unique connections in autistic brains too. So one part of the brain might be connected to a different part of the brain that you wouldn't typically expect to see in somebody who isn't autistic. But even then, all of these differences are not uniform. So Flick's brain is going to have some brilliant, really unique connections that are just nothing like the connections in my brain. And they're going to be nothing like the connections in Anne's brain either. So they're all really very individualized. And I think, to be honest, just even thinking about our brains gives me a lot of joy, because it really, it explains so much. And I think whenever we tell a lot of autistic people about these differences, these structural differences in our brains, it allows us to say, so it's not that I wasn't trying hard enough. It's not that I was being overly sensitive. This is just how my brain processes things, isn't it? And then it gives you that ability to sort of just give yourself a break. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really very surprising for a lot of people that there is literally that structural difference there, isn't it?
Yeah, but look at those pictures. They're so pretty. I absolutely love those pictures as well. And again, it just makes me feel joyful knowing that that's out there. Right, Flick. So what does it mean to be autistic?
So in practice, yeah, having this different brain, what does that actually mean in terms of day-to-day life? Well, it means that we experience the world differently. So our sensory experiences are very different to non-autistic people an awful lot of the time. And that's because we're not filtering that sensory input in the same way as other people are. We're constantly processing it, probably, partly because of those extra synaptic pathways that we haven't pruned back. So we're just constantly processing that sensory information, which means that we have a really different experience of the world, in terms of, we might be sensory seeking, we might be sensory avoidant at times, and that's quite different to the way that somebody who isn't autistic is going to experience the world. And I think that, it's important to really to emphasize that these sensory differences are real as well. And I think that's why part of the reason we show those brain scans is to show that look, the differences really are there. We really are processing that information very, very differently to how somebody who's not autistic will be. We also interact with the world differently as well, which makes sense when you have a brain that's so very different, because, absolutely all of our thoughts, everything we do, we think, we feel, it's all kind of filtered through that autistic brain. So that really does inform all of our experiences. And we will also then react to the world differently, because of course, if we're getting the different sensory input, if our brains are structured differently, then the way that we react to it is also going to be very, very different. And we're very happy today to be talking about, one of those reactions will be autistic joy. Some of the less positive kind of reactions you might associate with being autistic will be things like meltdowns and shutdowns and stuff like that. But yes, we do have the really good positive ones as well, like sensory bliss and autistic joy. We also have some differences in communication as well. For a really long time, all of the narrative around autism was about how we had a deficit in communication. How autism was a communication and social deficit disorder. But we now know that actually it's not that we're bad at communicating, that we have these deficits. We just have a different communication style, and it works beautifully amongst people who are all using that same communication style. It's just very different to the way that other people communicate with each other. And so yeah, that's a really big one when we're thinking about what it means to be autistic. And then there are also differences in how we decide to spend our time as well. From being children right through to being adults, we often kind of choose to do things that might be a bit different to other people. We might choose to spend our time doing things that other people might find very baffling, but that we find really amazing and just really joyful, to tonight's theme. Sometimes that might include things like, sort of doing some parallel play with other people. Even as adults, my husband and I will often sit in the same room doing two different things, but we're still kind of connecting. We're still there together, but we're sort of focused on our own thing. He might be doing some carving, or he might be building a Magic the Gathering deck or something. I might be doing some doodling or some writing, or something along those lines, and we'll kind of sit there quite happily, and we can have a chat if we want, and if we just want to focus on our own thing, then we can. we have our special interests that a lot of autistic people like to really spend a lot of time immersed in as well. So sometimes there are differences in how we actually go about our day-to-day lives and what we like to do with our free time and things. And then a really big part of what it means to be autistic is how other people react to us as well. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of stigma out there. There's still a lot of ableism around, being autistic. So quite often those reactions are not positive. We quite often find that we get very isolated actually, and we do come across a lot of kind of stigma, and also just people who just don't understand. They just don't have that good knowledge of autism, which is exactly what we're here trying to change, because we would love for everybody to really understand autism properly with that really good quality up-to-date information. And another thing that we're hoping that tonight and all of the work that we do will kind of change is people reacting to the positives of being autistic very differently as well, and realizing that there are positives too, and really being those good allies when it comes to us showing autistic joy and things. And we will come to that later on in the webinar tonight.
Yeah, I do remember one time with an autistic child who was just showing autistic joy all over, flapping, vocalizing, really enjoying it. And some of the people just trying to keep their children away from this little one because they thought it was so different. And I found sometimes that just a really big smile can just be so disarming with that sort of thing. It's just like, yeah, they're just having a great time and I love it. Don't you? Isn't it nice to see someone enjoying themselves? And it just flips that on its head, doesn't it? That others reacting to us differently. But hopefully we can talk about that more as we go on. Yeah. One of the big questions that we get asked is, what does cause autism? So sex, basically. 80% of autistic people roughly have at least one, if not both parents autistic themselves. And I think whenever those of us who work at our organization and, a lot of those who we support as well, think about their wider families, the vast majority of us can recognize other autistic family members, and even if it's not parents who've identified as being autistic yet, they might have cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces or nephews. There's very, very high chance that there's going to be other autistic people within the family. Currently, 20% of instances of autism, this is how they put it in the study, are thought to be spontaneous. So, and it could just be that, mum's genetic material and dad's genetic material, whenever they mix together, could have something to do with it. We just don't know. There's potentially other factors that we don't know about, but we do know that it is not caused by Peppa Pig or vaccines or cake or chicken nuggets or parenting, and all these other different causes that we sometimes hear. We heard somebody saying they'd heard that autism was caused by TikTok the other day. You see autistic people on TikTok and then you clearly have to be autistic yourself. Yeah. So that's not the cause. The cause of autism is largely genetic. So now we've got a few of those just little bits and pieces out of the way. What are the brilliant aspects about being autistic? Will we choose? If we go through them all, we will literally be here all day, won't we?
Yeah, I think we could probably dedicate, a good hour to each of these on its own. So we should probably do a bit of pick and choosing. What's your favorite from the list then?
All of them.
How do you choose? How do you even begin to choose one? I know.
I think our quirky sense of humor is one of my favorites, because there's this idea that autistic people don't have a sense of humor. And I always think it's really funny whenever we do a training session, the number of times that people end up sort of bursting at the seams, laughing occasionally, because we do have that funny sense of humor. And you see some autistic comedians like Hannah Gadsby as well. Last time I watched Hannah Gadsby's Douglas, I literally had tears streaming down my face. It was so I think so many of us have a really quirky, sometimes a very dark sense of humor. But yeah, a lot of us have such a terrific one. And go on, tell me one of yours, and then I'll see if I can choose one more.
I know. I think right at this moment, because it probably changes, by the minute, which one stands out for me. But I think that so many autistic people are really creative, because there's that, like, a lot of people associate autistic people with being logical, and that's great, because many of us really are very logical, but so many of us are really creative, and I think that often goes really kind of missed, and people don't realize just how creative, and in a whole host of different ways a lot of us are, and I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. We were looking at the books in our office today, and so many of them being done by autistic people. And we still have little bits of art that autistic people had given us for previous Autistic Pride events as well. And just little things like that, I find utterly joyful. I really, really love our out-the-box thinking as well. Oh, hello, cat.
Yeah, autistic people also, we connect really well with animals. I mean, that's one we didn't
So
add, but come on, Romy.
Yeah. But I think the number of times I've sort of seen a problem, I maybe had either my former autistic students or other autistic family members, autistic friends, and other people are just really stumped about what to do about this. And then so many autistic people are just like, oh, why don't you just do this? And it seems so clear and elegant and simple so often. And it's just because of those unique connections in the brain, isn't it? And
Yeah.
that ability to just sort of get them working together. So it's like, that reminds me of X and Y, and let's put them together. We've got Z, a solution. It can just be lovely. Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. I think
I really don't want to go on.
Yeah. If I'm picking another for now, I'm going to say strong sense of justice, because I think so many of us really do strongly feel like we want justice for other people, and it links in quite nicely with the fact that a lot of us are very deeply empathetic as well. We often don't show it in the same way as non-autistic people do, but yeah, so many of us really feel very, very deeply for those around us, for anybody who's kind of suffering, and I think the way that we often react to the news really shows that, the fact that we would really like to have a better world for everyone, and that's really lovely as well.
Yeah. I think the autistic community has to kind of be my last one on this that I would choose. I think we don't talk enough. I don't think that there is enough talk about autistic culture and autistic community, and the fact that we do have a culture as well, so don't we? So I think that's probably my last one. If you want to have a last word on it, go on, since
Okay.
I grabbed another.
Okay. One last one. I'm going to go because we're doing it tonight, and so that always tickles me, is info dumping, because I do love info dumping, and info dumping about autism is one of my favorite things to do, which just makes this job so very joyful. So there we go.
Absolutely. Right. So when we're talking about autistic joy, what do we mean? And we came across this quote from Jules from Autistic Typing, and Autistic Typing is just absolutely one of our most favorite social media accounts, and all of us here are massive fans of Jules there. And so if you haven't already started following Autistic Typing on social media, please go and do that now. Don't worry, you're getting a recording, you can catch up, it's all good. But this this quote we found on their Facebook page recently: if you have never felt the bubbles of happiness from the depths of your belly, rippling through your entire body until it releases through a flapping of your hands or jumping in delight, you may not know that being autistic can be joyful. That just gives me goosebumps reading that, Flick.
It's really lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just gorgeous, really lovely. So me and Flick had a little think about what autistic joy feels like to us. So we popped these in. And for me, it does really feel like every single atom in my body is dancing and I can't stay still. It's enormous happiness that I need to express. It's not that I necessarily just want to express it. No, that it's a physical need to express it.
That's really lovely. And yeah, I said that it's like my heart is singing and my body is the music, because it really is a whole body experience. And when you get that joyful feeling kind of inside in your emotions, often the movement is just it's not even conscious, it just happens.
It absolutely isn't. And, and the number of times that I found myself really happy about something and then not noticed that I've started flapping, or that I've started rocking, or I've started bouncing up and down, until others, I can see the glee on their face because of what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm bouncing now. All right, okay, that's great. It's just lovely. But it's well seen. You're the writer, Flick. Honestly, that's a beautiful way. It's so poetic the way that you put that. It's lovely. Do you want to talk us through this one? When do we experience autistic joy?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are, look, this is not an exhaustive list at all. You know, there are loads and loads. But yeah, we kind of had a little think about when we experience autistic joy, when the other autistic people we know, you know, tend to experience that beautiful joy. And we thought that when we're immersed in our special interests is a really big one. You know, when you're really getting into something that you just absolutely love. And I think it's clear to see, you know, from behind on my pin board there, you can probably see a couple of crows and ravens, and I've got my emotional support raven here. So, you know, corvids, that's a big special interest of mine. And when I find out that there's a new video up from my favorite my favorite YouTube page that has a lovely talking raven, I get so excited. And yeah, just the feeling inside is really lovely. And then of course, and again, I'm kind of doing it right now, so it seems so appropriate, talking about our spins. And you know, you've probably seen just talking about, you know, talking ravens has made me all excitable and all kind of fidgety here. So, you know, talking about that as well, it really links in well. So yeah, our spins, our special interests, they're a huge aspect of autistic joy quite often. There's also certain sensory inputs as well, because yeah, that, you know, whether it's watching the snow falling, or whether it's, you know, your favorite kind of music or something, there's so many sensory inputs that people think autism and they think, oh yeah, those poor autistic people who really struggle with sensory stuff, you know, oh yeah, they struggle with loud noises, or they struggle with being touched. And it's true, sometimes, you know, we do have real problems with certain sensory input. It can just be too much for us. But on the flip side of that, there's sensory input that is just amazing. It's just absolutely the best. And that's just so exciting. Then there's also spending time with other autistic people. It's just it is just one of the best things. And I think especially if it's not something you've really experienced much before, you know, if you haven't kind of found the autistic community yet, that first time that you're in a group where everybody shares your communication style, you know, everyone's got that same neurotype, it's really just electric. It's just the best feeling. It's absolutely amazing. And then when we get good news as well, that can be really fun. And actually, I do remember, I didn't think that I flapped my hands for a long time, you know, didn't realize I was autistic, eventually kind of discovered that I was. And it was when I was sat and I received an email from somebody I really respected, somebody who was quite a big deal in the field that I was in at the time. They got in contact with me and they sent me an email, and I got really excited about this. And I was sitting there and I went, and then I kind of grabbed my hand and pulled it down. And I thought to myself, what was that there? And I realized that the excitement had made me flap my hands, and that I had spent so long suppressing, you know, all my stims and things, that I just hadn't realized that actually, yeah, getting really good news, finding out that somebody's got in contact with me who I really admired and respected, it made me so excited that yeah, I was all flappy. And that was really beautiful to kind of discover that, actually. And then there's being out in nature. Lots of autistic people really enjoy being out in nature, you know, whether that's going to the beach and picking up, you know, lovely shiny pebbles or shells or things, and sort of having the waves crashing, whether it's being out in a forest with the trees and the leaves, you know, maybe in autumn as well, with all the leaves that are all crunchy and beautiful colors. That being out in nature tends to bring a lot of autistic people real joy. And I think that a lot of us are quite relieved that some of those restrictions, you know, have been lifted, so that we're able to go out and really enjoy nature. That's been really nice. Stimming as well, which, you know, I've been doing on camera here. I've got stim toys with me. I knew you would as well, Marion. So yeah, stimming can be a really big one. And just for anybody who's not sure, Stimming is short for self-stimulatory behavior. So it's kind of any repetitive action that's really stimulating, you know, one of your kind of senses. So that might be with, yeah, fidget toys. It might be watching raindrops running down the window. It might be humming something. And yeah, that stimming can often just be a really joyful thing. Anything that makes us laugh as well. I mean, Marion mentioned about, you know, autistic sense of humor earlier. Some of us have a really wicked sense of humor, actually. But yeah, and it's not just any one thing. It might be that, you know, some wordplay can be really enjoyable for a lot of autistic people. Might be certain memes that we find really funny. Might be actual, you know, a comedy show, someone like Hannah Gadsby. But yeah, anything that kind of really just taps into that sense of humor can really bring us that joy as well. Helping others is a really big one for a lot of autistic people. I mean, we wouldn't be doing the jobs that we do if we didn't get a huge rush from helping other people, and it's something that a lot of autistic people really experience. I think for a lot of autistic people it can be something that really gets them through the day if they're struggling. If they know that they're going to be able to do something that's going to help somebody else, that can be a huge motivation, and then sort of seeing their response to that help and seeing, you know, how they've benefited from it can just be absolutely amazing. There's info dumping. I won't go into that again because, you know, I've already brought that one up and I'm in the process of info dumping right now, but it's glorious too. And did we mention spins? Did we mention special interests already? You know, special interest, really big one.
I don't know, we might have not mentioned it quite enough, but yeah, special interests I think is definitely worth thinking about special interests because there's so much fun special interests.
Oh, also special interests.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's absolutely not an exhaustive list. But I do like sort of those mentions of things like, you know, falling snow. Every time we had snow over the last year, the first thing that I've done is rushed to my back window and started recording recording it on my phone so that I've got a picture of it that I can watch again. Every time there is the snow lying on the ground, that crunch underneath your feet. Oh, it's just beautiful, isn't it? And it's so similar to that crunch whenever there's the leaves on the ground, whenever it's autumn time. And oh, that anybody else getting massive joy out the fact that the leaves are budding on the trees and just exploding out now. It's just that's getting me every day whenever I'm driving.
The one I'm
to work, yeah.
The one I'm loving at the moment is the gorse is all out in flower near us. And when I walk the dog at the moment, that coconutty kind of smell is just glorious. I really love that.
Now, you see, I hate the smell of coconut, so I'm really pleased I'm not near you, but I'm still loving all the daffodils that are out there because daffodils are just like an absolute favorite of mine in terms of flowers. And I just think that they trumpet joy all by themselves. You know, it's like this spring is here. Yes, it's springtime now. Here we go. Everything's being renewed. It's just lovely. We can talk more about that whenever we get to the to our discussions. So how do we express autistic joy? And again, this is absolutely not a full list, but hand flapping. Hand flapping is one of my most favorite things to do whenever I'm feeling an awful lot of joy. And I've recently noticed that the hand that I flap with, I tend to flap faster than my other hand. So I'm right-handed. I do use my left hand for writing sometimes, but that's a little bit slower. So I don't know if that's the case for other autistics. Something we can have a chat about in a bit. Jumping up and down, yes, absolutely, do an awful lot. So yeah, and it's something that we see an awful lot of other autistic people doing whenever we get really excited, which is just glorious. It's really beautiful expression of it. And I really love whenever I've had good news about something and then myself and either an autistic family member or an autistic friend have ended up jumping up and down together, because I think that expression of autistic joy just being compounded with each other, you know, both of us feeling it together. And because so many of us really just feed off the emotions of others, we're feeling our own joy, we see our friends joyful or our family member joyful, and then that makes us even more, and then that makes them more joyful because they see us being more joyful, and then before you know it, we're all high as kites. It's great. Lovely. It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. Info dumping, which again we've already spoken about, but yeah, we can often express that joy about info dumping about it too. Info dumping is really just like autistic love language, isn't it? Like that's yeah. It's I feel safe with you. I feel comfortable with you. I really want to just share and bond with you on this thing. So it's joyful doing it, and it can be an expression of joy as well, because we're talking about our special interests an awful lot of the time. And thank goodness we can do this for our jobs, so then we're not having to talk with our families about autism constantly. Echolalia and palilalia are two things that are really, really similar to each other. Echolalia is, or echolalia is whenever you are repeating a word or a phrase that you've heard somebody else use. So it could be a word or a phrase that you've maybe read in a book, that you've seen on TV, that you've heard somebody in your friends or family or a colleague say as well, and then you're repeating that. Palilalia or palilalia is when you're repeating something that you've made up yourself. And a lot of us do this as an expression of joy as well. And sometimes doing that can be just joyful too. When I was a wee girl, I really loved how to making the word yellow. And I don't know why I really loved it, but I think it was to do with the sound felt whenever it was coming out my mouth, the vibrations in my throat whenever I was saying it, what it was doing with my tongue, how it felt to my ears, all of it together. And I would just go around saying yellow, yellow, yellow. And it just made me happy to. And, you know, it is kind of linked to daffodils as well. So,
See, mine was
there we go.
apricot. Apricot.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one. I like that. Yeah. I do know a young autistic person who on occasion has gone around saying Zendaya, Zendaya. Excellent taste, I believe, and a really good word to be saying as well, with all those different sounds and everything too, which is great. Smock. I'm a huge fan of Calvin and Hobbes, and I remember one where Calvin was talking about smock as a word, and I just remember thinking, oh yeah, I do like that one too. That's a good one to say. With palilalia, yeah, being a word that you make up yourself, so it could just be any words that you just decide, oh, I like the sound of that. I'm just going to say that over and over and over again. There's sometimes other uses for echolalia and palilalia as well, but they can just be an expression of joy. And it's a kind of, it can be a way of stimming as well. It can be verbal stimming too. Yeah. And other vocalizations. So a lot of autistic children might go ee, or some autistic adults do that as well. You know, I've been known to vocalize quite a little bit. I do sort of growl sometimes whenever I'm concentrating, and sometimes I do it whenever I'm just happy too, because I like the feeling that it makes in the back of my throat whenever I do that. Although I am aware that I do that whenever we're writing webinars sometimes, Felicity. So. But we've discussed that. We know that. It's all good. But sometimes other vocalizations can be really good. I know other autistic people who might go quite a lot too. You don't vocalize quite so much around me anyway.
No, probably not. No, probably more when I'm alone. But yeah, I think the other day I noticed myself doing a bit of and I was like, I picked that up from Marion.
You're welcome. Emojis, I think, can be another one as well. I think sometimes as autistic people, and this was something that we ended up talking with somebody on our Facebook page about recently, sometimes whenever we're sending somebody a message, we don't always know if we are putting the right tone across, and sometimes emojis can be really, really handy for that. And I know that I was certainly one who might end up using exclamation marks quite a lot. And if I'm written 3 sentences in a text message and all 3 of them have got exclamation marks, I might look back and go, might want to change this a little bit. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I leave it, but sometimes I might go, nah, let's just put a string of emojis in here instead that might be vaguely related to. So sometimes we will use those as an expression of joy too. Frankly, sometimes I just want an emoji keyboard. I mean, it might take up half my office with the number of them that I would want, but let's see. Our facial expressions too. And sometimes our facial expressions don't necessarily match what other people might expect us to have. whenever we're expressing joy. So it's, if you've got autistic people in your life, it's worth sort of saying to them, right, see, whenever you're happy, what does your face look like when you're doing that, so then I can recognize it. Because not all of us have massive big grins on our faces whenever we're happy. Sometimes it can just be like a little quiet smile. Sometimes we look fairly neutral, but that doesn't mean that we're not feeling it on the inside. So it's a really good idea to sort of check with somebody. How happy are you feeling at the moment? Are you actually experiencing some joy here? Are you, what's going on? So it's going to be kind of, it's okay, because that internalized joy that can sometimes just feel like butterflies in your stomach that you're just keeping quite happily to yourself. Not everybody is massively expressive about it. But some of us will dance and sing and whistle and hum and do all so much more whenever we are excited. And as I said, for some of us, it just feels like we can't keep our body still. It's got to be that outward physical expression of an emotion, doesn't it?
Yes. Couldn't find the unmute.
Yeah. Again, do you have a favorite one there? Which one do you do the most? I think I do them all.
Oh, I mean, these days I do a lot of hand flapping, which is why it's so funny that I didn't think I did for so long. But
It's
yeah.
a lovely, it's a joyful thing, can't it be? As long as you're feeling safe to do it, you know, then that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Right. This is where we get a little bit more political though, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we're looking at now, so why is it actually important to talk about autistic joy? You know, why is this a subject that we should be discussing, that we should be dedicating an entire webinar to? And yeah, we came up with some really, we had a really sort of a good think about, well, why are we doing this actually? You know, why is it really needed? And for one thing, our expressions of autistic joy are often quashed, you know, like we might start flapping and then we get told to stop, to, you know, to sort of stop fidgeting, to stop kind of distracting other people, to you know, have quiet hands or something like that. You know, if we are vocalizing, then we might be shushed or, you know, told to be quiet. So, you know, quite often when we're experiencing this really positive, lovely thing, then other people will actually kind of stop it in its tracks. And that's really sad because you know, as we've discussed, a lot of people don't realize that there are positive aspects to being autistic. And I think part of that is because when we do experience these amazing moments, we're then kind of stopped from showing it. So then other people don't get to see that's even a thing. And that's really, really sad. It's really important to show people that you know, being autistic is not just having a list of deficits, having a list of problems and struggles and doom and gloom, that actually, you know, sometimes we have strengths because we're autistic, not in spite of being autistic, that we have really joyful moments, that, you know, we're not just kind of constantly sat crying or anything, that there are some really, really nice parts of being autistic as well. And really our you know, a big part of what we're doing as a charity is flipping that narrative. It's really kind of a motto of ours, is to flip the narrative around autism, to really kind of move away from that very medicalized, really deficit-based model, and look at autistic people as complete human beings, you know, where, yeah, sometimes we might have certain struggles, but then at other times we also have brilliant strengths. And, you know, sometimes, you know, things mean that we have negative emotions, but at other times we have these amazing positive moments where, you know, we experience this joy. It also protects our mental health to be talking about this as well, because it's really important for autistic people to know about themselves, that they can experience this joy, and that they, you know, that's a good thing, and that it can be linked to them being autistic as well, because so many of us do have really poor mental health, and a big part of that is that kind of narrative around being autistic and the way that the world kind of views us. So it's really important to talk about those positive aspects, and to really improve autistic individuals' sense of self as well, you know, to show that there are these really, really amazing, good, positive parts to being autistic. And also it lets people know that autistic people we can be happy. You know, for a long time, all of the sort of logos and everything around autism. You had puzzle piece with a crying child on it. That's just heartbreaking, you know, that people, when they thought autism, thought crying child, you know. It's really awful. And we're really just trying to move away from that to show that actually, you know, maybe people should be thinking autism, flapping out of excitement, you know, feeling joy. Why not? That's just as much a part of being autistic as, you know, having sensory overload or you know, going into a meltdown or something. So yeah, sort of letting people know that actually we do experience positive emotions. And just the fact that it exists, it is a thing. Autistic joy is something that exists out there. And so why should we not talk about it? You know, it just is. Is that fair to say? Oh,
Yes, yes, it is. Because if people want to get a full understanding about what it's like to be autistic, then we need to look at every single aspect, you know, not just those negative parts about being autistic. And I think we generally find that whenever we share what it's like to experience some of the negative aspects about being autistic on our social media, or then we find a lot fewer engagements, a lot more engagements rather than whenever we talk about the positive aspects, because it tends to be the negative things that people get drawn to. And whenever we see autism in the media, whenever we see it on the news, so much of it is around the difficulties that there are about being autistic. But that's absolutely not the full picture at all. You can be autistic and thrive. You can be autistic and be utterly joyful. You can be autistic and have a really good quality of life. You can succeed because you're autistic, and all of these things can sort of contribute to autistic joy. It is a key fundamental part of our existence. So we need to talk about that an awful lot more than we need to talk about things like the cost of raising autistic people, rather than looking at, you know, the full breadth of experience and why people might not be experiencing it all, you know, and what are the solutions and how to enable people to be experiencing that joy an awful lot more. So again, we're always like to help people know, right, how can you be an ally? So how can you support autistic joy? How can you sort of, as a professional who works with autistic people, as a parent, how can you, as a partner, as a sibling, as an auntie? So if you've got other autistic people around you in any way, shape, or form, how can you support that autistic joy? Well, one of the first things that we decided as a staff team was no quiet hands. The number of times we've seen on things like classroom walls, we've seen teachers say it to children, we've seen it as part of people's individual education plans. Quiet hands, just absolutely not. You know, we've actually seen teachers clasp kids' hands together to stop them from flapping. Those hands can be as noisy as they want, and flappy hands don't do anybody any harm as long as they've got enough space to be flapping. And if they don't have enough space to be flapping, then let them move to somewhere where they do. Okay, we are absolutely allowed to stim, as long as that stim isn't hurting ourselves or other people. Let us do it. So give us the flappy hands, let us have fidgety bottoms, you know, let us swing our legs, or give us something that we can swing on safely. Let us show those expressions of autistic joy, you know. And I'm thinking, you know, as a teacher as well, when I was reading a book to a class and the kids were really enjoying it, seeing those expressions of joy, I can't imagine why some people would want to quash them, but we know that they do. So let's sort of get it out loud, proud, no to quiet hands. We're absolutely allowed quiet hands, allowed to have loud hands, big, flappy, happy, loud hands in these areas if we want them. And we have to normalize different expressions of joy. And I think when some of us do some of these things, sometimes people do give us some odd looks at times. You know, as a middle-aged woman, people don't necessarily expect me to be jumping up and down maybe as much as I do, but you know what, I do it and I really enjoy it, and I do it around people that I feel safe to do it around. So it's all right to have a different expression of joy. And I love that I will sometimes get as excited as a kid on their birthday whenever, you know, something relatively small happens by comparison to what other people might think. So yeah, that's a really important thing. Let people express their joy in whatever way makes them happy. As long as they're safe and everybody around them else is safe, that's fine. Just let them go for it. It's all good. Support spins. Have we mentioned that special interests are important?
And special interests. Yeah,
And
you're remembering
special
that one. Yeah.
interests. Yeah, and special interests too. Special interests are really, really important for our mental health an awful lot of the time, and not being able to access special interests can be downright difficult for us. But we know that sometimes having a special interest in something or in a bunch of things can often be pathologized, and it can be medicalized, and it can be talked about in terms of obsessions and, oh, it's terrible that they just like trains and nothing else. Is it though? Is it actually? Is it hurting anybody? Are they really benefiting from it? Are they learning through it? Are they enjoying it? How do they feel whenever they're not getting access to it? So I think those are the kind of questions that people really need to be having a rethink about. And I think it's worth saying a lot of autistic people end up getting jobs in areas that they have as special interests. I mean, this is literally why Flick and Anne and I work in the jobs that we do, because autism is a massive special interest for us. It's something that we've learned a lot about. We've spoken to lots of other autistic people about. We've thought about our autistic lived experiences a lot, and then getting to use that to help other people and get paid to do so is amazing. And lots of other people who are autistic have jobs that are related to their special interests too. So allowing us to pursue those special interests can actually help us sometimes to create a career path as well. So not just beneficial because we enjoy it. And although sometimes it's just nice to have it as a way of helping us to regulate too. So whenever I'm feeling a bit dysregulated at times, then knowing that I can sit in my hammock chair, which I absolutely love in my house, pick up a drawing pad, play some video games, read a favorite book. All these things that are special interests of mine help me enormously across the board. So we need to stop pathologizing special interests and just allow autistic people to explore them as much as as much as they need to. And I think we just need to do more acknowledging that autistic joy exists. And, you know, by coming along this evening, and for those of you who are watching the recording, by registering, you've already done that. But like, how many times do we go to appointments or do training sessions and we'll mention autistic joy and people's faces are just really confused?
Or just completely blank.
That?
Like,
Yeah.
what now? Yeah.
It's they haven't heard of it at all. So I think let's talk more about it. Let's talk loudly about it. Let's talk about why it matters so much to us. And we need to talk about what it's like. You know, let's normalize these feelings because I remember whenever I was first starting to talk about what it's like to experience that joy as an autistic person with some of my friends who are not autistic and some of my family members who aren't autistic, they just could not relate to it at all. The closest that they could come is thinking about what it was like when they were small children and, you know, it was like Christmas or their birthday or Easter or something like that. That's the closest that they could get to. And they don't get to experience it on a regular basis the way that those of us who are autistic get to experience it as well. So I think that's really, really important. So, you know, let others know that it exists. Talk about what it feels like. And I think that's where learning and supporting autistic communication can really help, because if you're able to talk with autistic people about it and really listen to their experiences, take them at their word rather than trying to figure out if they're trying to infer something. They're not. Just take them at their word seriously. Then that can really, really help out. And then that also helps you to support those autistic people whenever they're communicating with others as well, if they're having difficulty getting their meaning over, and really learn about autistic culture. And this is something that as an organization, we really want to talk about an awful lot more. We've been talking about it a lot for ever since we started, but we're just going to carry on talking about it a lot more because as autistic people, we do have our own culture. We have our own ways of doing things. We have our own, you know, symbols to represent us. We have our own links in with other communities. And all of these things are really, really important to us. So acknowledging that we do have these really positive, beautiful aspects of being autistic, acknowledging that we have these differences, which are downright beneficial at times, and acknowledging that we do have our own unique culture is all a huge part of supporting autistic joy. Because the more that we have other people accepting us for who we are, the easier it becomes for so many autistic people to accept themselves as well and really embrace their identity, which opens them up to so much more autistic joy. And then they can, you know, explore their special interests a bit more, because we might not have mentioned them yet.
Yeah, yeah, special interest, you know, that's a good
Yeah.
thing.
Oh my goodness, why didn't we put them in this last slide, honestly?
Should have thought of that. So yeah, we wanted to just leave you with some key takeaways. You know, if you're going to remember anything from the webinar, what should you be taking away from it? For one thing, being autistic can be great. It can be amazing. It really can. It really genuinely does not need to be all doom and gloom. Being autistic can just be absolutely brilliant. The fact that being autistic means having that differently structured brain, you know, think of those brain scans. We literally just have that difference there physically inside our brains. There's also the fact that autistic people can and do experience joy. We genuinely do. We get that absolutely amazing feeling. You know, think of those quotes from earlier, describing the joy that we can feel. So it's so important, I think, to hold on to that and to remember that. It's also important to remember that the way we express that joy is completely valid. It might not be the same way that non-autistic people tend to express joy, but that doesn't mean that it's any less valid at all. It really is absolutely fine. And also, it's really, if we want anything to be taken away from this tonight, we want everybody to remember that everyone can play a part in supporting autistic joy, not just autistic people. Absolutely everybody can really kind of play their part there in making sure that autistic joy is well supported and known about. So yes.
Absolutely. So, you know, for those who've watched the recording, thank you so much for taking the time to watch all the way through. We really appreciate it. And we hope that we'll see you at another webinar. But for those of us who are still here, let's go and have a chat about all of this. Julie, are you happy to stop the recording?